Today we continue our series of sermons on the Epistle of James, one of the short letters in the New Testament that is beloved by many people because it's so practical. It provides practical wisdom for imperfect Christians. And when we look at it, we're finding how the early church, now early Christians, struggled by what James is addressing. And the reason why we like it so much is because when we read it, we find these are the same things that we're struggling with today. And so today we're going to listen carefully for what James has to say about words and the power of words. That was July 2020 when there was an airplane that was getting ready to take off from the Charles de Gaulle Airport in France, in Paris, and there was another airplane coming from Newark, New Jersey, a 787 that was preparing to land. And as the plane was preparing to land and one was taking off, the air traffic controller made just a slight slip of the tongue and said that the 787 should land on runway 09L. 09L. Now, that slip of the tongue, the air traffic controller didn't catch and didn't realize that this other flight that was a flight heading to Spain was taking off from the very same runway at the very same time, 09L. And so the runway that he was meant to say was 09R. Just a slight slip, just one letter, 09L versus 09R. That 787 begins to land on runway 09L. And all of a sudden, the plane that's getting ready to take off sees it, calls the air traffic controller desperate, and the 787 pulls up at the last minute only 300 feet away from a terrible disaster. Hundreds of people would have died in that plane crash, all because of the missed letter R instead of L, a slip of a tongue. Words and even letters have power. That's what James is going to tell us in his epistle. We're going to look at James chapter 1 and James chapter 3 and a little of James chapter 4, and we're going to find this statement, which was summarized, actually captured by Proverbs 18:12. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. 108 verses in the epistle of James, 20% of them are dedicated to this theme of the power of the tongue. Now, James' epistle, again, is known for practical wisdom, and underlying that whole epistle is one central Christian ethic. It's what Jesus said was the second great commandment. Moses quotes it in Leviticus as one of the most important commandments, or as a critical commandment. James says it this way: fulfill the royal law found in Scripture. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Now, we're going to find that verse applies to almost everything James is going to say, but it certainly applies to the power of the tongue, that we're meant to use our tongues to love our neighbor. And remember, our neighbor is anybody who needs us, anybody we see or come in contact with. We are to love our neighbors, we love ourselves. And that means that we're going to use our words to love them, to practice agape, to bless them, to encourage them, to build them up, to care for them. Now, each week we have a scripture memory verse, and our scripture memory verse this week is from James 1:19. This is a passage I memorized when I was a teenager, when I first was reading the Bible, and I have memorized it and said it many times since then. You've memorized it if you've been a part of our church for any length of time, because we shared this in another sermon series about 8 or 9 years ago. But let's say this together: be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Will you say that again with me? Be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. Now, if you're at one of our locations, you're going to receive this card with our scripture memory verse on it. I want you to tape it to your mirror or your dash, or one of our students, our high school students, sent a picture this week that showed it taped to her computer so that every day at school it's sitting there and other people can read it. And she's reminded when she opens up her computer of the memory verse from last week. I'd like you to put this somewhere where you'll see it and say it out loud in the morning and again at night. Now, if you're joining us online or on TV, you can go to core.org/next, cor.org/next, and you can download it and print it, or you can make it wallpaper on your computer or on your phone. So I'd like to encourage you to do that. All right, so be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. This verse shows us a little bit of what agape looks like, what love looks like, the royal law. And why I love this so much is because by nature, we're wired to do the opposite of this. Instead of being quick to listen, we're quick to speak and slow to listen. So we're slow to listen, quick to speak, and quick to anger. And what this is calling us to do is to be just the opposite of how we're wired: quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. And we all know the aphorism, the thought that we have 2 ears and one mouth in direct proportion to how much God intends us to use these. But of course, we struggle with that, don't we? And so quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry.